Hello, everyone. I'm Milda Kvizikiewicz. I will be hosting this session. And just a quick reminder for presenters, you have 20 minutes each, and then we will have questions after each presentation. And everyone can ask in the chat, and I will try and read your questions, and I will try not to lose them. So we will start from Wojciech Kordyzon. He has graduated from the University of Warsaw, and his research is focused on the cultural history of the 16th and 17th centuries, as well as book reading and printing history. So Wojciech, the floor is yours, and let's have a nice start.
Thank you so much. And today I will discuss the genre choices made by the Polish-speaking publishers working in the 16th century Königsberg. I argue that the Polish publishing program was planned as a set of fundamental genres for religious education in the vernacular language, but seen from the Lutheran perspective. This case study comes from an observation in the paratexts of various books. I will discuss it in more detail, that the publishers had explicitly named their publications as a part of a larger strategy oriented on filling in the gaps in the book market. These gaps were defined by two factors: the genre of the book and its confessional affiliation. That is, the Königsberg publishers, not always working together, but also competing with each other, were trying to eventually provide an exhaustive set of books seen as essential to Lutheran piety. Königsberg's case is a good subject for a study of genre-based strategy for several reasons. First, throughout the 16th century, Königsberg in the Duchy of Prussia became an increasingly important local and political and cultural center. Having adopted Lutheranism as state confession, its role in the local confessional debates increased, including the role it played for the dissidents in the neighboring lands of Poland and Lithuania. Thus, its impact was constantly growing in the region. Second, I hope you can see the whole chart. Second, it remained periphery regarding its connection to the Germanic culture of the Holy Roman Empire. As a printing center, Königsberg remained far beyond the efficiency of the larger cities in Germany. It still transferred the ideas and technical thought from the German cities, though, which in the isolated position of Königsberg are easier to observe and thus analyze. Third, the presence of print agents in the city was limited but large enough to build varied dynamics. During Duke Albrecht's rule, various print agents were active, and at least 4 printing shops operated from the 1520s. Until Albrecht died in 1568, Hans Weinreich was the first to run a permanent printing press in the city since 1524. Over 2 decades later, 2 competitors arrived. A branch of Wittenberg's printing shop of Hans Luft was established in 1549 and was run by Andreas Aurifaber, Luft's son-in-law. Additionally, the Czech printer Alexander Aujesdecki was drawn to Königsberg to support the development of Slavonic printing in the region. None of these printers, however, survived the competition of Hans Daumann of Nuremberg, whom Albrecht invited to operate a printing press for the Duke and Academy in 1554. He gained ducal support to such an extent that he became a monopolist to print in the duchy, both city and the country, which was granted to him by the privileges in 1558 and 64. Fourth, Königsberg's environment gives a unique opportunity to study the Polish language, to study how the Polish language publishers dealt with the language of scarce vernacular printing tradition. When the first Polish language publications were printed in the 1540s in Königsberg, the vernacular Polish books were not broadly produced. Krakow was the sole relatively considerate center of book production. It was Catholic, though, so for the Polish-speaking Protestants, designing a complete book offer oriented on this confession was mostly work to be done from scratch. This is one of the reasons the share of vernacular printing, as you can see on the slide, in Polish is surprisingly high in the overall production in the prevalently German-speaking Prussia. To get some idea of the thematic scope of the entire production in the period between 1524 and 1575, I have tagged each edition I have in my data with one of the 6 typical categories. Religious books that clearly dominate, and its contents is quite self-explanatory, as I hope. Scientific publications, I have excluded theology, though it is sometimes difficult to differentiate various genres. Official printing, that is, the ordinances and mandates commissioned by the ducal court. This is probably the trickiest category due to its evident underrepresentation. The number of extant editions of broadside ordinances is undoubtedly lower than the actual production, and the archival sources that are complementary enable one to update this list, yet are incomplete and cover only chosen and narrow timeframes. For instance, we are informed only by accidentally preserved bills. Occasional printing, the 4th category. These are primarily poetical works, such as epithalamia or epitaphia, or print iterations on several occasions. Some scientific books, which are books mostly on history and natural history. 6th, utility, which is the popular knowledge, such as reference books, mostly herbals, dictionaries, phrase books, and law collections. And the 7th category, which is the narrowest one, where I have gathered these few works, which are literary works, but have neither the religious persuasion function nor the explicitly mentioned occasion they pertain to. These are mostly poetic collections in Latin. Subject clusters are informative, but do not give any detailed perspective. As you may see on the next slide, a chart reflecting genre represented by the printed books also lacks clarity and would not be an efficient tool for understanding the implemented strategies. For this, I was trying to adopt a more diachronic approach to visualize my understanding of the Königsberg strategies related to the genres. You may see now some statistics concerning publishing solely in Polish on this slide. To give it a more diachronic perspective, I have divided the period 1544-1575 into 6 consecutive clusters of 5 years each, apart from the first one. Together, they encompass nearly 70 editions of Polish books in the period. The charts respect the proportions in the terms of number of editions. As you may see, only 3 thematic areas are covered by the publications in this language and in Polish. The prevalently religious character of the books is unquestionable, but it is worth noting that some publications appear classified as utility genres or official printing. Such a perspective provides some information, but let's dive into the details. One of the publishers active in the city, Jan Seklucjan, emphasized the continuity of his output and tended to explicitly mention either the previously printed works or the ones to be published soon. For example, in the 1549 Catechism edition, he brought up the previous edition from the 2 years earlier, indicating many potential readers were asking for their copies, which they had been unable to obtain because it was out of print. In 1568, he informed about the additions that had not been included in the 2 previous editions of the text. We can find similar indicators of cross-referencing in songbooks too. When publishing the first compilation in 1547, Seklucjan referred to the Catechism from the same year and suggested that the presented collection of songs shall be complementary to the catechetical work. In the songbook edition from 1559, he anticipated future updates according to the changes that could be introduced in the future church orders, so that the parishioners could use books compliant with the authorities' recommendations. Such notions made by Seklucjan led me to conclude that the order of published works mattered and was designed to be consecutive. In some cases, when a single print agent worked on it, it reflected an individual plan. In others, when several individuals competed to draw the most attention or funding to the publication of a given type, it demonstrates the community need to be fulfilled. I find it informative how Polish-speaking Lutherans perceived these steps of religious education in Prussia. I hope these diagrams I will present will illustrate how this concept was translated into the published editions. Catechisms, as the very basics of faith, were published consistently throughout the period. Initially, the production was more intense, but the new editions were constantly supplied in the following years. So it is with songbooks, which were printed the entire time. Catechisms and songbooks needed to be available as the church orders in the duchy recommended teaching from the vernacular and printed version of the catechism, as well as provided a list of the hymns to be sung during the service in the church. Given the manner of their usage, these were probably the types of books that were most exposed to the damage while being used. What appears as a single point in time is the vernacular Bible translation, published in Königsberg throughout the early 1550s. Not to overcomplicate the argument with details, it would be enough to say that it was only New Testament in the very first printed Polish translation, which was published partially and then as an entire New Testament edition. Since the 1560s, when new translations were prepared in Polish by Protestants and Catholics, the Prussian Lutherans did not develop this endeavor further. Interestingly, the postils, which you can see in orange, are produced intensively, given the scale, of course, only after publishing the New Testament translation. For example, in the 1556 postil, Lucian pointed out that for many readers, the sole text of the New Testament is insufficient, and they desire to use vernacular commentary, which he gave as the primary reason for preparing his collection of sermons that he had edited. Thus, he revealed his awareness of the gradation by difficulty between the books he published. It is worth noting that in this perspective, postil is perceived not only as a tool for preachers, but also as a more learned and detailed commentary for the use of the adherents. Other printed tools for individual piety, mostly prayer books, were provided in the first half of the analyzed period. Similarly, the works of controversial value, printed extensively in the first period, were gradually found less productive for gaining new supporters. It probably reflects how the Prussian Lutherans lost the impact on the development of Reformation in Poland and Lithuania, where since the late 1550s, the Reformed circles were building their communication strategies, disseminating their books, gaining new supporters in Poland, thus making the export from Prussia less profitable and less efficient. As I have mentioned, some Polish-speaking publishers justified the edition with the recommendations of the Prussian church orders. This way, at least some of the production could be perceived as following the norms introduced by this document. While other ducal ordinances and mandates were mostly printed in German, it is important to note that church orders were significant enough to deserve constant translations in Polish. At the same time, Lithuanians or native Prussians did not receive such. How does it correlate with the previously discussed publications? On this slide, I have grouped all the religious books discussed before. Purple dots inform about the church orders printed in Polish. These were regularly published and updated as the German original was. This document regulated the religious life in the duchy and as such translated for the use of Polish-speaking adherents in the state. It might be reasonable to assume that such a document had more limited potential for exploitation to Poland or Lithuania than more religion-related books. Having analyzed the material, I concluded that recognizing also a group of semi-official printed documents with a normative value would also facilitate my understanding of the production dynamics. For example, a confession of faith belongs to this group, not being official print per se, loose or exact translations of the Augsburg Confession, as well as the collection known as Repetitio Corporis Doctrinae, with the Augsburg Confession, its apology, and the Schmalkaldic articles, were consistently provided for the Polish-speaking recipients, perhaps also for its normative aspect, aiding to shape the Lutheran orthodoxy. Eventually, instructions of various types supplemented the publications mentioned earlier. Examen Theologicum, the questionnaire for the candidates to become a preacher, or instructions on how to perform and interpret the baptism, also informed about the existing rules. What I find
I
essential.
think your sound cut out for a little bit.
Oh,
now we can.
For how long, you mean?
No, it's just a few seconds.
Okay,
everything
I'm so
is fine
sorry.
now.
So I mentioned the instructions, which also inform how to perform and interpret the baptism. And these were also this sort of genre that inform about the existing rules. What I thus find essential in this context is that the entire group of normative documents in Polish, either official or just printed with the support of the Duke, were publications pertaining to religious life and contributed to implementing the Lutheran worldview for the public. Among the variety of works I classified as utility genres published in Königsberg, that is the almanacs, calendars, herbals, news law collections, various handbooks and reference books. Almost all of the books published in Polish were reference books connected to linguistics, dictionaries, and phrase books. Unlike the religious books, the earliest editions of dictionaries and phrase books printed and then reprinted in Königsberg seem to be an investment made by the printer himself, Hans Daubmann. The first-handed dictionary was a reprint of a successful work by Franciscus Mimmer, printed earlier in Krakow by Hieronymus Vietor. On the other hand, the anonymous German-Polish phrase book was accompanied by the apostrophe to the reader, signed by the printer, Daubmann, who explains that good knowledge of this these two languages is commonly considered most useful in the region, and children are popularly taught both languages. Therefore, he intended to facilitate a device supporting children's learning process. Apart from the editio princeps of the massive Latin-Polish dictionary by Jan Montyński, which was an external and prestigious commission, the small and handy linguistic reference books printed by Daubmann can be considered as his economically justified reaction to the Polish language publishing in Prussia. Looking for an efficient way to take advantage in the gradually growing vernacular book market, Daubmann made a relatively safe investment in learning tools with no apparent confessional affiliation. His predecessors before 1554, on the other hand, who were the executors of an earlier production, did not decide to invest in the new publishing sector, relying solely on the commissions of the religious-driven publishers. Wrapping up, I would like to suggest some conclusions that come from this charts. I do not think that this case study of Königsberg gives any universal pattern of designing publishing strategies for developing early modern languages. It does provide, however, some insight into how one of such processes was in fact running. My argument is that the entire market in Prussia was subordinated to building a new ideal society, the value shared between the confessionally driven publishers and their patrons, such as the Duke. Such a newly created society, which is Lutheran, multilingual, and multi-ethnic, needs a proper education. The gradual advancement of difficulty level in the books dedicated to religious education shows that the entire endeavor was conceptualized as processual. Providing catechisms illuminates the new truth. The Bible provides the relevant source. Apostilles and other learning devices, such as commentaries, teach the procedures of interpretation, and it cannot work in another order. Simultaneously, it happens in an environment with clear rules. Church orders and printed confessions supported and organized the intellectual sphere. Only after some time did other secular print agents try to fit in this model, such as Daubmann, who proposed his linguistic reference books as a tool supporting the designed education model, but not interfering. Nuances I have not brought up in my talk mostly pertain to the fact that editions I have analyzed do not reflect the mutual relationships between the various print agents, their disagreements, controversies, and alliances. However, a contemporary book recipient is not necessarily as informed as a historian nowadays who feeds with detailed information. On the contrary, I believe a Protestant book buyer in the 16th century might have just wanted to purchase a complete set of books fulfilling their needs, regulated by the confessional norms. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Wojciech, very much for a very insightful presentation. Do we have any questions? Has anyone you have the time? I see Bartlomew Sek wants to raises his hand.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Okay, because I'm working with the very similar area, it means something as the statistical approach to the publishing houses. I am very interested in the question how you did construct this categories for your prints, because you presented two different slides. Yes, it was one with the 7 groups of some categories, and then you decided to compare it with the genres. And when you created these 7 groups, have you used any library catalogs, any other forms of classification from the, let's say, sources outside, or is it only your own creation?
It's not entirely my own creation, but thank you for this interesting question. But I haven't used the library classification. I was trying to reflect the variety of these books and pamphlets that were printed in Königsberg, and I mostly consulted other monographical studies of the printing shops in Poland and Germany. So I've used the recent monography on Eggenolfs in Germany, printed in the Wolfenbüttel series, and also I have consulted just to check what are the ideas, the recent very learned and nice books by Magdalena Komorowska on Piotr Kowczykowie. So this is just a matter of compromise. I couldn't tag everything as detailed as I wanted, because then I have realized that I have many objects that fit only, I have many categories that have only one copy or one edition which they are attributed to, and this simply does not work. Sometimes I had to make the clusters bigger.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any more questions? I'm going to nothing written in the chat. I have a very biased question, and maybe it's just will show my incompetences than an actual problem or an actual question. So as a Lithuanian, I have a question. Is it possible, and have you thought of how to do that? Because as we know, in Lithuania, Polish language was also very prominent and obviously very much used. Is it possible to make a difference and differentiate, were those books created and published more for Lithuanian audience or more for Polish audience, or maybe it does not matter, or maybe it's not even something that you have ever looked at?
Mm-hmm. It's difficult. I think that Polish speakers were one of the reasons that Polish speaking as a let's say as a process was one of the reasons that the Lithuanian community in the Prussia, in the Duchy of Prussia, was not that strong. I mean, it was just cheaper and easier to print in Polish because it was assumed that the recipients in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania would also understand. But, of course, Königsberg is the place where the very first Lithuanian books are printed, and this is made by the same environment. But what is very distinctive in this case is that the printers themselves, they did not know any vernacular languages other than German in most cases. So they had their publishers, and simply the publishing ecosystem for Polish language was bigger, and they were, I don't know, fighting, competing, and that's why the production was growing. For Lithuanian, it was much narrower community, so they didn't have anyone to disagree with. They were just printing their stuff, and I think in the period I have discussed, it's just 3 or 4 titles. What is more, it is a bit stronger later after the period I have discussed. So it's gradually changing, but there are not that many editions to sort of encompass them statistically, because it's just, less than 10 titles in the 16th century. But it is very important for the Prussian, just to finish with sense, for the Prussian community, because sort of native speakers of various languages other than German, that is Lithuanian, Old Prussian, and Polish, were officially recognized by the Kirchenordnungen. And this is something that is very modern, I would say. So also Lithuanian and Old Prussian languages were appreciated and recognized by the state. Thank you. And sorry for such a long reply.
Thank you. So we are giving you our virtual applauses for your presentation, and
Thank you so much.
I see
It was
no
a
more
pleasure.
questions. And I want to introduce our second speaker in the session. It's Taisiya Leber. Sorry if I butchered your name. Please, could you open your camera? Yeah. She is from the Gutenberg University of Mainz. Her dissertation was on female founders of monasteries in the late medieval Balkans. And in recent years, she has been doing research on the history of early printing in the Ottoman Empire. So once again, we are giving our virtual applause to you, and we're giving the floor for you. You can start your presentation.
Great. Thank you very much for your introduction. And thank you very much for this possibility to speak online. I would like to start my presentation today with a quote from an interesting source from the mid-17th century, the petition of the Greek Metropolitan of Paleopatras, Theophanos, to the Russian Tsar Mikhail Fyodorovich in 1645. The Turks won't allow us, Greeks, to print book in Constantinople because the Franks who are in Constantinople prevent this and gain a victory through bribery. And therefore, O great Tsar, the poor Greeks must submit, and other people insult them, Greeks, not only Franks and Lutherans, but also Armenians and Jews. And they tell them that they, Greeks, have no empire and that they are not worthy to have their own printing houses and must therefore submit to the Franks. And it especially humiliates the Greeks that our enemies do not allow us to print our own books in Constantinople. Thus, in the middle of the 17th century, the Greek Metropolitan Theophanos complained to the Russian Tsar that the Greeks had no opportunity to print books in Constantinople. He named 2 factors that prevented establishing Greek printing houses, namely the policy of Ottoman authorities against the Greek printing, and also efforts of Europeans, first of all French Catholics living in Constantinople, ready to bribe Ottoman authorities to prevent the creation of printing houses. It is clear that the Europeans had the widest access to printed matter, also in Greek, thanks to European printing, which the Ottoman Greeks, it turns out, were deprived of. Even more interesting is the reference to Armenians and Jews who, quotation, humiliate Greeks because they do not have printing houses. The lack of own kingdom was a typical accusation the Greeks made against Jews, but not in this case, where the Greeks were subordinate to the Ottomans and deprived of the empire. As for printing houses or printing shops, it is interesting that Theophanos mentioned Jews and Armenians, apparently the only religious groups that had their own printing presses in Constantinople. Constantinople appears here as a clear center of the Greek universe, also the logical center of Greek intellectual life, and thus Greek printing. The circumstances of the Ottoman rule, together with interests of Catholic diplomats, prevent establishing of permanent Greek printing. It was not an accident that the addressee of the Metropolitan's petition was the Russian Tsar, since, as per Theophanos' wish, Moscow had to become an alternative center of Greek book printing, of education in Greek language, and translation from Greek into Russian and Church Slavonic, of course. The focus of my talk today is on trans-Ottoman options of Greeks by the question of establishing printing facilities primarily in southeastern and eastern Europe. It seems that Greek projects were directly connected with the factor of mobility of church hierarchs, first of all patriarchs and bishops, mobility of printers, printing tools, and printed books between the Ottoman Empire and Eastern Europe, which is also the framework of the German research program DFG on transotomanica, where I'm part of, and this presentation is also a part of. It is well known that before and after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, numerous Greek intellectuals and scholars moved to Italian cities, which later also became important centers of book printing in Greek language. First of all, for humanist editions of ancient Greek authors, but also for Orthodox Greek liturgical books that were destined for the Ottoman book market. In the Ottoman Empire, Greeks did not have any printing facilities in the first centuries of the empire. The first patriarch that allegedly had tried to establish printing in Constantinople was Jeremiah II Tranos. It was German Protestant theologian Martin Crucius who mentioned under the year 1590 that he had heard from one Greek priest that Jeremiah II had been interested in establishing a school and a typography in Constantinople in order to improve education for the Orthodox clergy. But he failed because the clergy was not interested in any improvement, as this also Latin quotation shows. There are no other proofs for this story by Crucius, but it is also known that some epistles and treatises written by Patriarch Jeremias and also by the Patriarch of Alexandria, Meletius Piras, had been translated and published in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The negative reply of Jeremias II was the idea of a union between Orthodox and Protestant churches that had originally sent to Tübingen, had been published in a Latin translation in Krakow in 1542 by the typographical library under the title Censura Orientalis Ecclesiae. You can see the picture, I hope. And it was dedicated to Pope Gregory XIII. The initiative of the translation and publication of this text by Patriarch Jeremias came from chaplain of the Polish king Stefan Batory named Stanisław Sokolowski. And it was not actually an intention by Jeremias II that this book would ever be published and accessible for Catholics. Later, Jeremias II reacted with an epistle against Pope Gregory's reform of calendar in 1583. He wrote it in Yash in Moldavia then, and only a couple of months later it was published in a Slavonic translation in Ostroh to the Ukraine in the typography of the Orthodox Prince Constantine Basil of Ostroh. It's the second picture here. It seems that at the end of the 16th century, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth becomes an important center for printing epistles and treatises by Greek patriarchs from the Ottoman Empire. To mention is Meletius' treatises on Christian piety and answer against the Jew. It's the first picture you can see here. It's a bilingual edition in Greek and Slavonic, published in Lviv in 1593. Meletius Piras was so proud of his polemical work being published in both Greek and Slavonic languages in Lviv that he also mentioned this book in his letter to the Russian Tsar. The preface of the following Meletius Piras treatise mentioned It was a success of Miletius' anti-Jewish bilingual edition that became a reason for publishing his other work in Greek, Dialogus Orthodoxus Christianos, that was published in Vilnius in 1596. Epistles that Miletius Pigas wrote in support of Ruthenian Orthodox Christians against the union with the Catholic Church were translated into Slavonic and published in such famous anti-unionist editions as Apocrypsis, Ostroh 1597, and a booklet in 10 sections, also published in Ostroh 1 year later. You can see it here in the middle. And the third picture with Greek letters, it's from publication in Vilnius. Another republication or publications, not sure, of Miletius Pigas epistles succeeded in Greek under the title Peritis Archistu Papa, against Catholics, definitely, in Constantinople in 1627. It was most probably published by Kyrillos Loukaris, the Patriarch of Constantinople and the nephew of Miletius, who himself was a strong advocate of book printing. He was helped by a Greek emigre from London, the professional typographer Nicodemus Metaxas. Together, they initiated the very first Greek printing press in the Ottoman Empire in Constantinople in 1627. The fate of this press was very tragic because it could function only several months before it was closed by the Ottoman authorities, because there were numerous Jesuit complaints also about the anti-Islamic character of Greek editions. It seems that the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth became an important platform for printing contemporary Greek Orthodox epistles and polemical treatises at the end of the 16th century. Patriarch Kyrillos Loukaris himself had been well acquainted with printing and publishing by Orthodox Ruthenians during his stay there, before he attempted to establish his own printing press in Constantinople with a similar goal of printing primarily polemical treatises against Judaism, against Catholic Church, and so on. After his plan failed and the typography in Constantinople was closed, the question was raised again where the Greeks could print their polemical works. The strong influence of the Catholic Church in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and a small number of Greek reading audience made it impossible to develop it to the real center of Greek printing. An alternative place for printing was needed, and Greek hierarchs decided to try their chances by the Russian Tsar in Moscow. The quotation by Metropolitan Theophanos at the beginning of my talk was an example of Greek attempts to persuade the Tsar to establish Greek typography in Moscow and to make it to a center of Greek Orthodox education and culture. Not only Theophanos was unsuccessful with his mission, but also famous Orthodox scholar and church hierarch, Greek Patriarch of Jerusalem, Dositheos, who addressed several times the Tsar, asking him to support the idea of Greek printing in Moscow. His attempts failed as well. Although Muscovite rulers liked to perceive themselves as true protectors of the Orthodoxy, they preferred to keep printing under their own control and to allow only liturgical books to be printed at the only official printing house in Moscow, and of course only in Church Slavonic. It means that Greeks did not really have a chance with their missions by Russian Tsars. An alternative center for printing in Greek became then Moldavia and Wallachia, Ottoman tributary states. The first text in Greek was printed in Iași in 1642. The tools for printing with Greek characters were requested by the ruler Vasile Lupu, the Moldavian ruler, from Lviv, again to the Ukraine, from the Orthodox Brotherhood of Lviv. It was a synodical decree by Patriarch of Constantinople Parthenius I that was printed in Greek in 1642 as the very first booklet to be printed in Greek in Ottoman tributary states, Moldavia and Wallachia. After a longer break in 1680s, 1690s, Moldavian capital Iași and Wallachian capital Bucharest became real centers of Greek book printing. At least 44 books were printed there in the period between 1682 and 1716 in Greek. Most of the books were Orthodox polemical, anti-Latin, and anti-Protestant, as well as theological writings. A huge impact on Greek printing had Patriarch of Jerusalem Dositheos, who composed and prepared miscellanies for print. Just to mention, 2 thick volumes published at the initiative of Dositheos II, a book against Calvinists, 1690. It's here the second one to be seen, and the so-called Tomos Arapis, a very ironical title, Volume of Love, a polemical treatise against Catholics that was printed in Bucharest in 1698. It seems that Wallachia and Moldavia had much more Greek readership because of numerous Greek-speaking church hierarchs and Ottoman Greek-speaking elites, so-called fanariots, who were present in the tributary states. In conclusion, by addressing the main question of this conference on the issue of centers or peripheries of printing, it seems that example of Greek printing can and need to be studied only in a global trans-regional context. Even though Constantinople, the capital of the extremely centralized Ottoman Empire, was definitely a center of cultural life of the empire and also a center of Greek ecclesiastical structure, it did not become a center of Greek printing in the early modern period. Even though Venice was in some sense a center of Greek printing, it was not seen like this by the church hierarchs because of the Catholic character and censorship in the city. Cities of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, like Lviv, Ostrog, or Vilnius, became important centers for printing and translating of Greek treatises at the end of the 16th century, but lost this role pretty soon. The Greek dream saw Moscow as a center for Greek printing, but this dream never came true. We can definitely see Bucharest and Iași as important centers of Greek printing for the context of Orthodox polemical and theological works. But in the context of humanist Greek printing, they would be nothing more than a periphery. The question center or periphery remains subjectively a question of perspective, in my case, a trans-Ottoman one. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Taisiya, for a wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions? Like people, please ask some questions. Be more active.
It is pretty early in some parts of Europe still because of the time change.
Yeah,
really hard.
Maybe that's it. So I see that we don't have any questions, but if you will have a question for Taisiya, maybe you will think later. So please write in the chat and we will ask you again. So thank you again. And I would love to present our next speakers. We will have 3 speakers, if I'm informed correctly. So I want to present Vasiliki Gerontopoulou, Maria Patsarli, and Kostas Diamantis. They have a very interesting topic, deciphering Rigo Velestinlio's Charta of Greece by using digital humanities approaches and 3D visualization tools. We are very welcoming all the digital humanities presentations, so we were very happy to have your application, and the floor is yours. Please start your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present our work at this international conference, and congratulations for the perfect organization. I'm Vasiliki Gerontopoulou, Honors Library Coordinator, and together with Maria Patsarli and Kostas Diamantis, we'll present a series of educational activities inspired by Rigo Velestinlio's Charta of Greece, implemented by the Honors Library and the Cartographic Heritage Archives. These activities are for school teams of primary and secondary education in Greece, aiming at improving their historical knowledge, revitalizing the interest in the history of Greek printing, and acquiring digital skills. This is the Honors Library. This is our building. It's in this at the city center of Athens. And I will start with Vienna. As during the 18th century, this city emerged as the major Greek printing center. One of the most prominent historical documents printed there in 1,222 copies, and this was a big map of Greece that is called Rigo's Charta, as it was created by a revolutionary figure, Rigo Velestinlio, who unfortunately lost his life trying to distribute this document. Today, only 60 copies of this map have survived, and access to them for the public remain limited, and as it's usually stored inside libraries and archives for security and preservation purposes. On the other hand, Charta is mentioned only briefly and occasionally in Greek school books, so the story behind its creation and its impact remains largely unknown. Tackling with this issue, we will present you a series of educational programs on Rigo's Charta, showing how our team managed to introduce this important historical document to the public, motivating young people to approach the lesson of history of Greek printing with an interesting way by using digital applications and by adapting innovative learning techniques. At this point, I will give the floor to Maria Pazarli to transfer us to the 18th century and to present the historical frame and explain why Vienna became an important printing center, playing a key role in the preparation and the outbreak of the Greek War of Independence. Maria, the floor is yours.
Hello. Unfortunately, I cannot turn my camera on for some reasons here in Microsoft Teams, but I will continue with the presentation. As you all know, we used to call the 18th century in Europe the Age of Enlightenment or Age of Reason because of the intellectual and philosophical movement that focused in the value of human happiness and the pursuit of knowledge obtained by means of reason, while exploring ideals such as natural law, liberty, progress, toleration, fraternity, constitutional government, secularism, etc. During this same century, the Greek communities that were created by merchants in cities all over Europe and Ottoman Empire developed great commercial activities, supporting at the same time remarkable typographical and publishing activities. Vienna is one of the most significant political, commercial, financial, and cultural centers in this era. After 1790, the Greek community of the city reaches also its greatest cultural and financial prosperity. Greek scholars, merchants, and students discuss the new ideas about freedom, secularism, and modernization of social structures. They translate, write, and publish books, music, and maps. At this same period, when the publication of secular books At this same period, when the publication of secular books, science, and literature emerged to be the majority of printed works in Greek language, Rigo Velestinlio is arriving in Vienna. Rigo is widely considered the most prominent personality of the Greek Enlightenment. His political ideas and his revolutionary activism in the spirit of French Revolution played an important role in the struggle of Greeks for independence in the early 19th century, influencing also the neighboring people in the Balkans with radical ideas on political and social equality. Over and above of being an intellectual activist for the revolution, Rigo was primarily an innovative scholar and teacher. His works included mostly translations, revolutionary scripts, and a limited cartographic production of particular importance. His great map, the Charta, is the first ever printed map in Greek language and a cartographical monument of modern Greek print history, representing the summit of significant activity in writing and translating geographical works in Greek language since the beginning of the 18th century. Vienna was a major point in Rigo's lifetime. During his 2 trips, Rigo got active in Vienna's Greek community and was connected by collaboration and friendship with several of its members. He published his works in some of the most well-known Vienna's publishing houses, connecting his fame and, at least in one case, his fate with them. In 1797, Rigo was arrested by the Austrian secret services, accused as a revolutionist, and died a few months later in the Ottoman prison of Belgrade. It was then that the Marquis de Spaudos Greek printing house of Vienna, one of the most prominent printing houses of Greek diaspora, was shuttered, accused for conspiracy. Riga's innovative ideas for the education include, among others, the use of simple language, of symbolic images, the theatre, the songs, the music, and finally the use of maps. Additionally, it is known now from the Austrian archives that he was interested on his time's geography games for educational use. His cartographic masterpiece, the Carta, is supposed to represent the ancient Greece and the Greek colonies. In fact, it's representing almost the whole of the Balkan Peninsula and Asia Minor, the area of a future free democratic republica founded in the spirit of French Revolution and according to the principles of ancient democracies. Besides of its value as a revolutionary item, Carta's educational aspect is also of great importance, since it was intended to be used as supportive educational material. As a multimedia of another era, Carta is reflecting its creators' innovative ideas about the role of education in creating citizens devoted to the idea of freedom and on high-order quality education provided for free in Greek schools in Ottoman Empire and in Europe. Rigas understood the great communicative power of the symbolic language of the maps and used it while he was creating the thematic content of the Carta. He intentionally incorporated symbolic elements such as images, ancient coins, verses, city plans, and comments derived from the rich classical Greco-Roman and European cartographic and literary tradition. All these iconographic elements promote in many ways the ideal of freedom in every aspect of personal, social, and national life. They also supported the vision for the establishment of a free democratic state in Balkans based on the ideas of freedom, justice, and equality, while they reflect the historical continuity of Greek culture and civilization from antiquity to the 18th century. Carta's rich thematic material and hidden stories was the basis where we focused while preparing our project. All areas of interest are connected to the main concepts and ideals of the Age of Enlightenment, incorporated to Riga's revolutionary ideas. They also give us the chance to investigate the ideas and ways of action relating to the search of freedom in every aspect of life, adapted to modern needs and interpretations. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Gerontopoulou to explain the challenges we faced while approaching this kind of historical documents with such intriguing characteristics.
Okay, thank you, Maria. As Riga's Carta is one of the main exhibits of the Onassis Library, its secret symbols and stories soon became the inspiration for a series of educational activities involving this map. First of all, we designed an educational program for students of the primary education entitled Paintailings, Traveling with the Myths and the Symbols of Riga's Carta. Paintailing is an educational technique that creatively integrates several arts. This activity was addressed to children aged 8 to 12 years old, teachers and families. Having to deal with an excellent document and educational tool from the past, the aim was to make the study of the map a liberating and enjoyable process for children, motivating them to express their ideas and feelings. As a result, teaching history and geography turned into a fun educational game of deciphering puzzles and visual creation. This activity was implemented online via Zoom, WebEx, or Teams platforms, and on-site in collaboration with the author and illustrator, Lida Barbarousi, and with the scientific support of the Cartographic Heritage Archives. From 2019 to 2023, more than 300 primary schools and 5,500 students and teachers participated in this program. Another program that was activated was live streaming guided tours at the Onassis Library. During the pandemic, schools remained closed for a long time, lessons were implemented online, and educational excursions were not permitted. Under these difficult circumstances, the Onassis Library offered to teachers and students a way out of their boring homes, making the lesson of history more interesting. These interactive digital tours on the treasures of rare book collections, archives, and works of art managed to connect cultural heritage with education, enriching the history lesson, taking advantage of the inclusion, and giving the opportunity for equal participation of schools all over Greece. The schools were connected live for a teaching hour, 45 minutes, through an online platform, and actively participated in a documentary unfolding unknown stories of the history of Greek printing. During the years 2020-2023, the aforementioned online activity was implemented in over 270 primary and secondary school units, as well as in special schools from all over Greece and abroad, involving over 6,500 students and their teachers. The great success of this educational program led to the decision to keep its online format even after the pandemic, promoting equal access to the same opportunities for all, contributing to the elimination of discrimination and inequality in education, and demonstrating a good example of open access to knowledge that can also be adapted by other cultural organizations, museums, archives, and libraries. Also, I have to add here that this educational program was implemented with zero budget. At this point, I will give the digital floor to Kostas Diamantis to present us more digital activities on Riga's map. Kostas?
Hello to everyone, and thank you for having us here. So let's now see how it is possible to break out of the walls of a library and reach a greater audience. For example, in order to enhance the experience of Riga's Charta inside of the Onassis library, an augmented reality application was created for in-house usage alongside the map. This would increase the interest and capture the imagination of the younger audience visiting the library, urging them to explore the map and its symbols. As the app was developed, more and more symbols were created. Those were associated on the map at their respective locations and were then brought to life using 3D animations and narrations by using a mobile device. Soon the application would be made public to the Google App Store for everyone to access and use with their own physical or digital copy of the map. The app was also included in the published children's book entitled Young Rigas and the Secret Symbols of the Charta, thus further enhancing the experience with a digital treasure hunting game. In 2020, a Pan-Hellenic student competition took place, providing online to all resources and material related to Riga's Charta. In order for the school groups to develop their digital projects, they could use free open source programs or software with educational licensing. The scientific collaborators of the competition, in order to assist the teams, provided an indicative list of software, such as the 3D creation software Tinkercad, the 3D game engine Unity 3D, and the image editing software Photopea. They also created a series of video tutorials starting from the installation up until the operation and completion of selected digital tools. The aim of the competition was to bring the map to life, transforming it into a 3D video game, a virtual reality exploration, an augmented reality application, and a video narration. By using such technologies can greatly highlight a historical artifact such as the Charta and prompt the participants to learn about the heroic life and revolutionary personality of Rigo Velestinlio, enrich their knowledge about the Age of Enlightenment, the ideas, influences, and effects, learn about the history of map creation in the past, study the iconographic details of the Charta, realize how the symbolic language of the map, old or new, can be used to transmit various kinds of information, form ideas and opinions, disregard stereotypes and prompt to action, combine distinct scientific fields, talents, skills, and technologies in order to synthesize a cooperative digital project, conduct historical research and get in touch with primary sources, old maps, and archival material, get acquainted with innovative digital tools and techniques, collaborate, cooperate, and communicate with their classmates and their professors, set targets and timely complete them, visualize ideas by using their knowledge and imagination in accordance with new digital technologies and contemporary communication practices. It is vital to bring to light such significant historical documents and to motivate the next generation to reuse and reinterpret hidden treasures of the Greek cultural tradition, in this instance, through new technology applications and visual art creations. The usage of such technologies strengthened the emotional involvement of the participants with a historical document and cultivated a positive attitude and enthusiasm towards the learning process, enriching the content of history and geography lessons, and created awareness on cartographic cultural heritage through the use of innovative technical tools in education. Also, it encouraged creative thinking, allowing discovery learning and giving the participant a feeling of surprise and excitement. The possibilities technologies has to offer are vast and constantly evolving. They range from the sense of immersion and virtual presence to the recreation, a presentation of an artifact, the visualization of its symbolisms, to many more possibilities. Using AI tools, the user can now have an intriguing conversation on a virtual environment with a historic figure without leaving their own house, or they can even generate artificial landscapes using 3D geometry to visualize and present information like never before. Text can become narration, and symbols and signs can become a video game of knowledge, which could help the participants to enrich their own knowledge in an intuitive manner. More importantly, with the expansion of the broadband internet, all of those artifacts can become accessible virtually to everyone around the world at any time, breaking down the barriers of countries or the physical buildings. Now, back to my colleague.
Thank you, Kostas. I have to add here that we have also created a digital educational platform, Classroom, in order to store and share all the educational material created. This educational repository, through an easy-to-use asynchronous lesson structure, helped interested school groups to participate in the competition, derive creative ideas, and implement their own digital projects. As for the results, the educational results, we realized that through this holistic approach, a historical document was presented in a comprehensible and modern way, inspiring and motivating the new generation to interact with cartographic heritage and prepare them to face the technological challenges of the future. This innovative learning model successfully combined the digital world with the humanities, led to a deeper understanding of our cultural wealth, and made it accessible to the educational community and to the public. And as for the future, we continue designing educational activities that connect history of printing with new technologies, facilitated learning and gaining new knowledge. During the summer 2023, we collaborated with XR designer Renia Papathanasiou, and we worked on Greek printers from Ioannina that set up their printing houses in Venice from the 17th to the 19th centuries. The result was that we managed to transform a traditional workshop on the history of the book with book binding activities and AR technology. And we gave life to 4 printers' marks of Greek printers of that time. I will end our presentation here, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we will be glad to have your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Does anyone has any questions? I have several. More or less from the Kostas part. I heard that you mentioned, I'm not sure if the app or the Hack the Map part is open source. Is it possible to find documentation publicly? What tools have you been using? Maybe you have the code somewhere. Is it possible to, to explore from that perspective, or is it not?
Of course, everything is available for everyone on the platform Classroom, on Access Classroom, and there is detailed tutorials. There are sample files. It's not the finished thing, but you can download the first step and you follow the tutorials in order to make your own augmented reality or virtual reality application. The aim of the whole endeavor was to motivate people, not give something ready to use without putting everybody to be creative and think about it, how they want to interpret their own version of the Harta.
I see that Justina has a question, but I just have one more question about the AI tools, as it is booming right now. And maybe I've misheard. You already have an AI chat in the Hack the Map, or is it a plan to have? And what did you create your own data set? Did you teach your own model, or have you used something pre-taught?
There isn't one at the available libraries at the moment. We have done some tests, and we have used predefined AI versions, because obviously you can't build your own world from scratch. You have to use some open source software in order to take things further. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here. Basically, it's a very exciting new field that you can actually have many possibilities, like chat to a historical figure and interrogate them about what happened in real time, as if talking to a friend of yours.
That's so cool. Are you not afraid that the historical figures will start talking too much? Justina wanted to ask how printers' devices were brought to life through your project.
So could you repeat the question? What devices?
How many? Yeah, how many printers' devices were brought to life, and maybe in what way they were brought to life?
Okay, I will answer this question because it's something that happened this summer. Okay, and actually we worked on 4 printers marks. Nikolaos Saros printers mark, Nikolaos Glikis printers mark, Panos and Dimitrios Theodosiou printers mark, and Andreas Iulianos printers mark. These are 4 printers marks of 4 printing houses that were set in Venice by Greek merchants from Ioannina, from a city of Greece, or from a Greek city, that moved in Venice, and there they decided to set up a printing house, and they have their logos, the printers marks. So they chose some creatures for these logos. Nikolaos Glikis can be translated in English as Nikolaos the Sweet. So he had chosen a bee as his printer mark. Nikolaos Saros had the mermaid with the 2 tails as his printer mark. Dimitrios Theodosiou and Panos Theodosiou had an eagle with 2 heads. So during the summer, we had the project that was called Plasmata, Creatures, and was a big exhibition in Ioannina. And we wanted to connect the city with our library and our old books. So we used these 4 creatures. I forgot to tell that Andreas Iulianos had an eagle too as his printer mark, and we tried to give life to these creatures. We used the application that is free, and you can download it in the Apple Store and in Google Play, and it's called Artivive. I will write it in the chat right now. And you can search it and you can download it. And if your library has Greek books that belong to these 4 printers, you can open this this application on your phone, and you can bring your phone spotting these printers marks, and then they will it will bring them to life. And if you show my final slide, I can show you 2 of these videos that are giving life to the printer mark of Nikolaos Saros and Nikolaos Glikis. If you want to show it again, I can do it again. It's here. This is the result you can see if you download the application. You can see the bee, and the bee is regains its freedom, let's say that, like the Greeks, because during that time the Greeks is under the Ottoman Empire and they want their freedom. So we set free this bee, and let's see what happens if with the mermaid with the 2 tails. The frame opens and she's free. And the same happens with the other 2 printers mark.
Thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. If you could write in the chat the printers' names, that would be awesome too. I think we all will be hacking our way through the Greek books after the conference. And I see no more questions. So from the 18th century and modern day technology, we are traveling back to the 15th century. And I want to present you the last presenter in this session. It's Simona Inserra. She's associate professor at Catania University, interested in incunabula and book history. And Simona will be presenting a Teutonicus Almanacus in the Franckfordia Alamanus, Magistri Artis Impressoriae in Sicily. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Milda. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today, especially because I've been working on a research project on concerns so-called peripheral incunabula. So the paper I'm now presenting is in part of a broader project, which, in order to be completed, need further excavations in libraries in all the world, and above all, more and more archival research. That's because those carried out have not yielded great results for reasons related to the history of the archives in my region, Sicily, that on several occasions were subject to spoliation, destructions due to the wars and to natural causes, earthquakes above all. In any case, we all know that research never ends and that further data could always emerge to enrich what is today known. At the moment, I therefore ask you to consider that the data I present here as part of a work in progress. The research I'm carrying out is focused on the birth of typography in Sicily, the extreme southern territory of Europe, the outskirts of outskirts, the periphery of peripheria. It's focused on the uses of Sicilian incunabula in the rest of the world, therefore on their readers, owners, and on their diffusions worldwide. This project involved the first phase of census of the editions printed in Sicily, an excavation and in-depth work on the figures of the printers active in the region, a study on the typology of the printed edition, and a census of the copies now in private libraries and in public libraries in the world, tracking provenance data. To understand something more about circulation, a further phase of the research is dedicated to the study of historical catalogs auction catalogs, post-mortem and notarial archive inventories lists, other lists, such for example, the list drawn up by Hernán Colón to have an exact consistency of his own collection, on which Matilde Malaspina by Copenhagen University is now working. Or the very precise list drawn up between the end of 16th century and the very beginning of 17th century to respond to the request of the Congregation of the Index of Forbidden Books. A very important list which allows us to photograph the state of things in the very beginning of 17th century in Italian monastic libraries. Today, these lists are partially present in the Ricci database, available at a website that I could write if you need. I would like to underline that before me, many bibliographers dedicated themselves to study the Sicilian press, reaching important results. In 1988, Professor Concetta Bianca, scholars at Florence University, published their study Press, Culture and Society Messina at the end of the 15th century for the Center for Sicilian Philological and Linguistic Studies. I have made an extensive use of these and other essays, and I'm grateful to Professor Bianca for her studies conducted specifically on Messina proto-printing. After 35 years, I would like to be part of this process by extending the research to the city of Palermo and, above all, turning attention from publishers and editions to the copies and their owner and their readers. In Sicily, between 1474, or rather 1478 and 1500s, some printers from Germany or Flanders set up some printing houses. No Italian Sicilian name is present in the colophons to directly indicate a printer. In some cases, the name is omitted, but scholars have been able to identify the workshop, mostly through the study of characters. In some cases, it's only in the paratext that some Italian names emerge, in addition to those of the authors, of course, who appear as economic supporters, modern figures of editors of the text, and so on. What is striking in the colophons is the indication of the origin of the printers, present in some cases and for some printers always in every subscription. Let's see some examples. The first printer in Sicily, in Messina, was Heinrich Halding, active between 1474 and 1478 and 1479. In the previous years, Heinrich Halding was located in Naples with a typographer called Barmentolo in 1476 and Alon in 1476 and 1477. In his case, the source seems to attest a first exploratory trip or visit in Catania in the previous years, perhaps 1471, aimed to verifying the presence of legal text to create an edition of Sicilian constitutions, then printed in Messina by another printer, Andreas van Brugge, in 1479. In the Gratulatio, at the end of the collection of Sicilian constitutions, after 2 years editorial work conducted very diligently by the editor Pietro Appulo, he wrote on the colophon Sub biennali cura laboriosiaque diligentia. The same Appulo writes something useful for us today about the presence of Halding in Sicily. He wrote a printer named Enricus came in 1471 from Rome to Catania, attracted by the hope of making a lot of money, but scared by the confusion, we don't know if political or social or due to the confusion in papers and documents, he ran away from Catania towards Messina. Who was this printer named Enricus who came from Rome to Catania with the intention to print the Constituzione Siciliane with great hopes to make money? Tradition is firm in indicating that it's Heinrich Halding, a printer from Cologne in Germany, who stayed in Rome and then in Naples, and who signed himself as Magister Rigo d'Alamagna, that's Master Rigo Heinrich from Germany. Heinrich Halding is so therefore considered the introducer of the printing press in Sicily. Here you can see the Halding editions on the right, a colophon of the Sicilian edition, and on the left, two colophons of the editions printed in Naples. Related to other two printers, Johann Schade and Heinrich Stark, we have nothing about the provenance in colophon, only the qualification as magistri impressori. Here you can see the 5 editions known and 2 examples of colophon from the first 2 editions. Georg Ricker is signed itself as Georgius Ricker Landau Alamanus, here the colophon of the only known edition. Andreas van Broek, known at the moment for just one edition, put the toponym with his name, as you can see here in the colophon. It's interesting, at the end of the century, the figure of Wilhelm Schomberger, prophilic printer, that seen itself in the colophon as Guilhelmus Schomberger or Schomberger de Franckfordia Alamanum, or sometimes Guilhelmus Schomberger Alamanus de Franckfordia, or only Guilhelmus Schomberger de Franckfordia. About this, the presence of a poem dedicated by the author of a pamphlet to his printers is surprising. In the intitulation, the author wrote Carolus in laudem impressori Guilhelmi Schomberg de Franckfordia Alamanni viri non ignobilis. Therefore, there is the Olivinus van Broek, is to now at the moment for just only one editions, didn't put anything in the colophon, just messana impressum est presens opusculum singulare and the date to complete the list. The printer, only one printer in Palermo in this period, seen himself as Magister Andrea Viel de Wurmacha. That's Worm in Rhineland-Palatinate in Germany, situated on the Upper Rhine, about 60 kilometers southwest of Frankfurt am Main. Therefore, these are German printers, and this is perfectly in line with what happens in other places, in northern Italy, for example, but also in other countries, such as Spain, so similar to South Italy. We know that after the sack of Mainz in 1472, many people, not only printers obviously, moved from Mainz itself, the cradle of typography, or from Germany in search of fortune. For example, to name some of the best known, Johann Mentelin settled in Strasbourg, Ulrich Hahn in Rome, Svanheim and Pannard in Subiaco, near Rome, the first typographers in Italy. At the same time, Venice became very quickly the city for excellence dedicated to the print, with the pioneers Johann and Bindelin von Spira. The expansions of the printing press through the rest of Europe was progressive, since 26 years passed from its production in Basel around 1478 until its arrival at the end of the century in Copenhagen in 1493. By the end of the century, there were printing houses in some 250 European cities. After just over 2 decades, the printing press arrived in Spain from Italy a few years before arriving in Sicily. It was first established in Segovia around 1472, and in 1473 some printing houses were opened in Barcelona, Valencia, and Sevilla. As in Sicily, the first printer in Spain was a German one from Heidelberg. He went to Rome, and from Rome to Segovia, and then to Toulouse. It's an example that, far from being exceptional, was so common, the mobilities of printers. About the Sicilian editions, the editions known are 26. 25 printed in Messina, where was twice printed the Epistole Heroides in 1478 by Halding and in 1484 by Schade and Fortis, and only one edition in Palermo. According to Professor Bianca, the Sicilian edition can be divided into 4 groups. Political ideological press, as the Protesta dei Messinesi, that can be considered as a political manifesto of a power group. De Constitutione Set Capitula Regni, De Consuetudines of Messina, De Vitae Philosophorum by Costantino Lascaris, and partially falls here the Epistola Rabbi Samuelis, a work with an anti-Jewish approach. The second group of works is connected to city events and ceremonies. Una Oratio Funebris, una Oratio for the death of Eleonora d'Aragona, the Queen of Portugal, other Oratio for the deaths of some people. The third group are texts aimed to teaching like Rudimenta Grammatices by Perotti, Aesopus, Epistoles of Alaride, Ovidian Epistola, Thesaurus Musices, Historia Troiana. The Historia Troiana is a book with a didactic intent confirmed by the curator. The devices that the curator Faraone inserted in the books, like some interpretatio or argumentum for each part of the book. Then a vernacular editions, the fourth group, intended for a medium audience, for immediate use and dedicated to a widespread use. They are devotional works as Vita e Transito Beato Hieronimo, Fior di Virtù, Miracoli della Vergine, Scala di Virtuti, Fior di Terra Santa. This one with adventurous charter, printed in many cities many times. That means that sales are guaranteed. I would like to update this list by adding a fifth group to the four identified by Professor Bianca, the group of liturgical texts, a Psalterium and a Missale Gallicanum, which Professor Bianca places in the third groups as it says intended for the interest of the community. The second Sicilian 15th century, that of cities such as Palermo, Messina or Catania, is characterized by a demographic recoveries, urban expansions, new economic enterprises, such as the one of sugar in Palermo or the one of silk in Messina. Messina appears from many points of view as the most lively of the Sicilian cities, also and not only due to the presence of the port and the proximity to the Italian peninsula, for which, according to historians, there were the premises for the introduction and affirmation of the press. On a cultural level, for example, when the press spread at the end of the 70s, the cultural life of Messina was characterized by the presence of Costantino Lascaris, at whose school the political class was formed. With him, we studied Greek and Latin, the grammar schools called Faraone. And Faraone, we say, is the editor of the Historia Troiana by Ditti Cretese. Libraries here are rich manuscripts and printed books and are known. The private library of Lascaris, then transferred in Madrid after the revolt of 1674, the monasteries' libraries, the private libraries of nobles and merchants, has emerged from the study, for example, of Professor Henri Bresque, who brought to light and transcribed many post-mortem inventories between 14th and 16th centuries that help us to reconstruct the circulation of books in Sicily from the end of the 15th century. The Messina press seems to have been silent for a few years immediately after 1500s, perhaps due to the plague of 1501, which involved Lascaris himself, or perhaps the economic crisis, which no longer made the typography appear profitable. But attention to the big difference between Messina and Palermo. In Messina it has been printed with regularity since 1478. In Palermo, however, it seems to be only one edition, the Consuetudinis Urbis Panormi, and mostly commissioned, not the autonomous activity of a printer who decides to set up a printing house and make an investment. But now, let's focus on existing copy, the books which still survive today, their diffusions, and on the owners, as far as we have been able to reconstruct up now. I repeat that there are numerous gaps in knowledge of the early Sicilian printing press due to the lack of documentation that reliably proves the facts, due to the loss of editions that could give us more information. Half of the 26 editions, Sicilian editions, are now in single copies. 13 editions are present in only one copy and preserved in Italian and European libraries. Single copies are in Italy in Rome, Agrigento, Florence, Palermo, Venice, in Europe in Copenhagen, Manchester, Paris, Salzburg, and Madrid. Editions with more than one copy existing are in Italy, Europe, Vatican City, and United States, for example, in New York, in San Marino, in California, in Princeton, in Chicago, in Cambridge, in North Carolina. What I'm doing now is to study all the existing copy, 133 in the world, and make a catalog enriched tracking material data. The catalog will be published in traditional form, I hope at the end of the next year, and the copy-specific elements found in the incunabula will be inserted into the MEI. The partial result achieved until now show, for example, that the books have traveled extensively in time and space, have reached collections of bibliophiles, and in some cases have moved with the entire collection purchased. Is it, for example, the case of the very interesting group of 6 incunabula, now at the John Rylands University in Manchester, that comes from the collection of the Duke of Cassano, Italy, purchased by Lord Spencer, famous English bibliophile, during a trip in Italy. The sale was concluded and the books transported from Italy in the Althorp Castle. Then the Spencer collection became part of the John Ryland Library, now Manchester University Library. Editions and copies were described first of all by Dibdin, then by Edward Gordon Duff in the catalogue of the printed books and manuscripts in the John Ryland University, published in 1899. Another topic I'm working on, and for which the results are certainly partial, is that of the missing editions. It's for me a very interesting aspect, and I take advantage of this conference to thank Matilde Malaspina, Copenhagen University, for her collaboration in verifying some data present in the colon inventories, or in the colon Libros de los Epítomes. At the moment, we can say that there are almost 2 missing editions and copies well described in the colon inventory. A Vita Christi Salvatoris eiusque Matris Sanctissime, printed in Messina in 1492, and a Vita Christi Salvatoris, a Vita et Passio of Tantagata, printed in Messina in 1499, and the Vita Christi Salvatoris in 1492. This data comes from the alphabetical index of the Hernan colon. These are important because tell us that Colon purchased these 2 copies for his library. This copy really existed and are now missed. From what I've been able to verify, the copies are not now in the Colombina library in Sevilla. I am to continue my census, and I ask an help to a librarian with not catalogued collections, especially miscellaneous collection, because some printed works, some Sicilian printed works, are very small, just 1 or 2 quires, and there are maybe copies not yet catalogued in many libraries in the world. So, thank you for your collaboration, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Simona, for such an interesting presentation. And does anyone has any questions? I had a question about the catalog, but you kind of answered it during your presentation, because I wanted to ask whether you are working on a catalog or maybe you already have a catalog. As I understand, it will be published only in paper, but maybe do you consider about open access version online?
Yes, thank you, Milda, for your question. Sorry. We will publish the catalog in printed form in a series of books by editor Viella in Rome that's all dedicated to incunabula, catalogs of incunabula or studies about incunabula, collection of incunabula, and philological issues about printed books in the 15th century. What we will do every time is to put in provenance data on MEI, material evidence in incunabula, and also to publish the data in the SBN, the online catalog of Italian libraries. That's open access catalog. online catalog. Yes, so it will be possible to see all the data online or in a printed form.
Okay, thank you. And I had another question just blowing up, but I lost the train of thought. Sorry. Maybe
No
anyone else has a question? I remembered. You talked a little bit about the typographical differences between the, for instance, main Italian and European incunabula and Sicilian. What about the provenances? Is there a difference? Like, is it more, maybe more provenances or less provenances? Does it have an impact from that side, or only you are researching only the physical aspects?
No, I think the difference are only about the physical evidence in printing press, because we are very simple state of printing, not more xylographies, not more how can you say decoration. No, the provenance is, I think, is the same. 2, 3 or more names of owners stamped from libraries. And so on. So no difference for provenance, difference in printed, because yes, there are very simple printed books.
Understood.
Basic, I mean basic printed books.
Yeah, I understand that. I see that there are no more questions, so thank you again.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to listen to you, and I have to admit, I'm very lucky to have such disciplined presenters. We are on time. We started exactly on time, and we are finished exactly on time as our program states. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening, for giving your questions. And right now we are going to a long break. So have a snack, have a lunch, have a breakfast, depending on where are you living. And we will meet at 14:30 at third session. So depending on your time zone, please rearrange, recalculate your time when it will start. And thank you all again, and see you soon.